Right as our daughter was about to cut her wedding cake, my wife rose to give a toast. But instead of a blessing, she turned to me, smiled coldly, and said, "This will be my last family event as your wife." In front of everyone, she ended our marriage, with not a shred of remorse. Welcome to our channel, where betrayal meets truth, and every scar tells a story. What you're about to hear isn't just about a ruined wedding toast. It's about a man blindsided by the one person he trusted most, and the quiet, powerful rise that followed. Stay with us till the end, because sometimes the strongest rebuilds begin with public ruin. They say the proudest moment in a man's life is the day he walks his daughter down the aisle. And on that bright Saturday morning, I believed it. The sun beamed gently through the stained glass windows of the old country chapel, and my heart raced as the music began. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of joy. Emily, my daughter, my little girl who once needed help tying her shoes, was now a bride. She looked like something out of a dream in her ivory lace dress, holding tightly onto my arm. I could hardly speak as I leaned in and whispered, "You look beautiful." She smiled, her eyes welling with emotion. In that moment, nothing else existed. Not the years of hard work, the long nights I spent traveling for business, or even the quiet cracks in my marriage that had slowly been widening. All of it disappeared in that single moment of fatherly pride. The ceremony was flawless. The vows were heartfelt. Every detail had been planned for months. Elaine, my wife, had insisted we go all out. From the custom invitations to the horse-drawn carriage, she had overseen everything with the precision of a military commander. At first, I thought she was just excited, that this was her way of showing love. But somewhere in the planning process, I started noticing things. Elaine became more distant. She stopped holding my hand at night. Her eyes no longer lingered on mine. I chalked it up to stress, to middle age. We were both in our early 50s. Maybe this was just the next phase of marriage, the quieter one. But nothing could have prepared me for what she had planned. By the time we got to the reception hall, the celebration was in full swing. There was laughter, the clinking of glasses, and music drifting softly in the background. I was surrounded by family and friends, each one congratulating me on raising such a remarkable daughter. I smiled and nodded, hiding the exhaustion in my bones. The day had been long, but my heart was full. I watched Emily and her new husband twirl across the floor in their first dance as husband and wife. For a brief moment, I caught Elaine standing alone near the back. She looked calm, not joyful, not tired, just eerily calm. It struck me as odd, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just soaking it all in. Then came the toasts. Emily's maid of honor spoke, followed by the best man. Both speeches were filled with humor and tears, the kind of sentimental balance people hope for at weddings. Then it was my turn. I stood, heart pounding, and poured everything into my words. I spoke of the first time I held Emily, the way she used to sing off-key in the back seat, and the time she called me crying because her prom date bailed last minute. "You were always strong," I said, looking at her, "but I hope you know you never had to be strong alone." People clapped. Emily wiped away a tear. I sat down, feeling like I had done my part, like I had said goodbye to a chapter of fatherhood with grace. And then Elaine stood. At first, I thought she was going to offer a toast of her own, maybe something motherly, tender, to follow up the moment I had just shared. She tapped her glass gently with a fork and smiled toward the crowd. "I have something to say," she began, her voice clear, unwavering. "Before we celebrate this new beginning, I'd like to mark an ending." She turned to face me directly, and I felt something twist in my gut. This will be my last family event as this man's wife. We're getting a divorce. Just like that. No lead-in. No softening. Just a brutal, public declaration. A room that moments ago was filled with love and laughter now fell into a suffocating silence. My chest tightened. My breath hitched. I stared at her, waiting for some kind of punchline that never came. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Emily stood up halfway, her face contorted in disbelief. "Mom," she whispered. Elaine didn't even look at her. She just took her seat like nothing happened. I sat frozen, heart racing, the blood in my ears drowning out everything else. A few guests looked at me with pity. Others avoided eye contact altogether. I could barely make out their faces. The chandelier overhead blurred into a shimmering mess. I gripped the table, trying to steady myself. My mind scrambled for reasons. Was she drunk? Was this some twisted joke? But as she calmly sipped her wine, I knew. This was calculated, planned. She had waited for the most sacred moment in our family's life to unleash her truth. Not just to leave me, but to humiliate me. I wanted to stand up, to scream, to demand an explanation. But I couldn't move. My voice failed me. For years, I had stood by her. Through the loss of her father, through financial struggles, through sleepless nights raising our child. I had sacrificed promotions to be home more. I thought that counted for something. But as I looked across the room at the stunned faces, many of them friends who had once admired us as the perfect couple, I realized something. She didn't just want to leave me. She wanted to erase me, to burn down every image of our union with one public match. I wasn't just losing a wife that day. I was losing the illusion that we had been happy at all. And so I sat there, like a man buried alive in plain sight. While music resumed and awkward conversations tried to fill the void, I remained still. Emily came to me later, eyes red. "Dad, I didn't know," she said, over and over. But I barely heard her. My mind was already unraveling every memory, every moment that now felt like a lie. The wedding had given me one of the happiest moments of my life, and one of the cruelest. And that night, while the world danced, I began my silent fall into the ashes of a marriage that had died long before I realized. I didn't sleep that night. After the wedding, I drove back home alone, still in my suit, the tie loose around my neck like a noose I hadn't noticed tightening until it was too late. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It wasn't just the absence of Elaine, it was the absence of the life we'd built together. Her shoes were gone from the hallway. The mug she always left on the kitchen counter wasn't there. I opened the bedroom door and saw the empty closet on her side. Cleaned out. No note. No explanation. Just space where memories used to be. She hadn't just left me. She had erased herself, like I'd been a mistake she wanted no evidence of. It was as if I had been ghosted by someone I slept next to for 28 years. The next morning, I opened my phone to messages from friends, family, even distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were supportive, others nosy. A few acted as if her public ambush was some form of noble honesty. I ignored them all. I didn't need comfort from people who'd only just realized something was wrong. Emily called 5 times before I answered. When I finally did, her voice cracked with guilt. "Dad, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I believed her. She had always been honest with me. But I could hear the storm in her voice, the same one brewing inside me. She asked if she could come over. I told her not tonight. I wasn't ready to be seen. I wasn't ready to say I was okay when I wasn't. 2 days later, I met Emily at a quiet cafe halfway between her place and mine. She looked torn in half, like she didn't know whether to comfort me or scream on my behalf. She ordered tea and didn't touch it. "How long?" she asked, her hands clenched around the cup. I told her I didn't know. And I didn't. Elaine had been distant, sure, but I never thought it was fatal. I told myself we were just in a tired phase of marriage, that once the wedding stress was over, we'd reconnect. Travel maybe. Go to Italy like we always said. But all those dreams had been solo flights in my head. Elaine had been planning her exit like a general maps a battlefield. And I was the fool who handed her the match. Emily cried softly, and I just sat there, watching the cars pass outside the cafe window. Why would she do that at my wedding? She asked. She couldn't wait a day? A week? I didn't have answers. But I had guesses. Elaine wanted control. She wanted attention. Or maybe she wanted to create a moment so unforgettable that she could feel powerful in a life she had quietly resented. But whatever her reasons, the damage was done. My daughter's happiest day had been poisoned by the woman who raised her. That betrayal stung worse than my own. I had lost a wife, but she had lost the idea of her mother, and that wound runs deeper. Back at home, I started finding the pieces Elaine had left behind. A hidden envelope in the drawer with attorney contact cards. A joint bank account she had slowly siphoned over the last few months. I reviewed statements I had once ignored. Charges to hotels I'd never been to. Spa visits during weekends she claimed to be with her sister. The more I uncovered, the more I realized she hadn't just left. She had been building a lifeboat for over a year, and I hadn't seen a thing. I wasn't just blindsided. I was thoroughly outplayed by the one person I thought I'd never need to question. It wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy, and that made it feel even colder. Friends stopped asking how I was after the third week. That's when the silence truly kicked in. The phone stopped buzzing. The door stopped knocking. The world moved on. But I was still there, sitting on the couch at midnight, watching old family videos just to hear the sound of a home that no longer existed. I found footage of a Thanksgiving dinner from 6 years ago. Elaine was laughing, carving the turkey, her eyes lighting up when I leaned in and kissed her cheek. I stared at that image for an hour, trying to reconcile that woman with the one who shattered our family like a wine glass under her heel. Maybe she had changed, or maybe I just hadn't seen her clearly until now. One night, I sat in the dark, staring at the ring she'd left behind on the kitchen counter. No note, no explanation, just the ring. I picked it up, turning it in my hand, the way I had the day I proposed to her at the lake all those years ago. That memory used to make me smile. Now, it felt like a cruel joke. I placed the ring in an envelope and locked it in the safe. Not out of sentimentality, but because one day, maybe Emily would want it. Not to wear, but to remember. To remind herself what betrayal looks like in its finest dress. And in that moment, I made a quiet vow. Not to let this define me, but to make sure it never broke me. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't call anyone. I just sat on the porch, staring into the night, my hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Husband? No. Victim? Maybe. Survivor? Not yet. But there was something stirring in me beneath the heartbreak, beneath the humiliation. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was the slow, pulsing realization that if someone could orchestrate your downfall in front of 100 people and still walk away without a hint of shame, then you were never really in love. You were in illusion. And illusions, once broken, never return. Only truth remains. And I was finally ready to face mine. In the weeks that followed Elaine's public departure, I felt like I was waking up in someone else's life. The silence in the house wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. A heavy kind of emptiness hung in every room. I found myself forgetting things I'd done just hours before, losing track of time. I would pour myself a drink and stare out the window for hours, watching the trees sway like they held answers. The man who had spoken proudly at his daughter's wedding just days earlier was now a ghost in a home that used to be filled with life. I hadn't just lost a partner, I had lost a compass. And I had no idea where I was headed next. There was something cruel about the way Elaine had chosen to leave. It wasn't just that she walked out. It was that she chose a moment designed for joy to detonate the truth. It was calculated. I knew that now. And once I accepted that it was never about a failed marriage, but about a need for control, it all started to make a twisted kind of sense. Elaine didn't want a clean exit. She wanted spectacle. She wanted to be remembered. And worst of all, she succeeded. No one remembered my speech. No one remembered the blessing I gave. All they remembered was her standing with that glass, lifting it with the poise of a queen, and slicing the air with her words. I went through old photo albums one night. Something I hadn't done in years. There were pages of birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings, all frozen smiles. Some were genuine. Others, I now realized, were just masks. There was one photo in particular that stopped me cold. It was from our 25th anniversary. We were at a vineyard in Sonoma, the golden light hitting her face just right as she leaned into me. I remember thinking she looked peaceful that day, but as I stared at it now, all I could see was a woman already gone. The smile didn't reach her eyes. She was there, but she wasn't. I wondered how long she had been pretending, and how long I had been too blind to see it. Emily visited every Sunday, like clockwork. At first, we talked about nothing important, weather, recipes, the occasional family gossip. But as the weeks passed, our conversations grew heavier. She admitted she'd started therapy. "I just need to understand what kind of mother does that," she said once, her voice shaking. I had no answers. Only theories. Maybe Elaine had grown tired of playing a role she never wanted. Maybe she had fallen out of love years ago but stayed out of obligation. Or maybe she just wanted to hurt me and Emily was collateral damage. None of it made the pain any easier. But acknowledging the truth helped us both breathe a little easier. Then came the letter. Hand-delivered. Thick envelope. My name written in her handwriting, still neat, still practiced. I opened it slowly, expecting either an apology or an attack. It was neither. Inside were divorce documents, already signed on her end, and a typed letter. No emotion, just instructions. "I've spoken to the lawyers. We'll split the assets 60/40ths in your favor. I've also included the contact for my new address, should you need anything further." That was it. Not even a full page. No explanation. No reflection. Just an ending so sterile. It made me wonder if she had ever loved me at all. Or if I had simply been a placeholder in the life she truly wanted but never had the courage to pursue until now. I didn't sign the papers right away. Not out of hope. That was long gone. But out of principle. I wanted her to wait. Just like I had waited for love to return, for connection to reignite, for her eyes to light up when I walked into her room. I gave her those years. Now she could give me these weeks. Instead, I immersed myself in rebuilding. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. I started cooking for myself, reading again. I joined a local men's group, not because I liked the idea, but because I needed voices other than my own. Men with war stories of their own, some worse than mine, others eerily similar. And in that circle, I found something I hadn't felt since before the wedding, solid ground. One evening, I sat by the fireplace and thought about the last words I had spoken to Elaine before her announcement. They were simple, forgettable, something about making sure the DJ had the right playlist. That's what our marriage had become, logistics, schedules, silence. I thought back to the beginning, before the child, before the mortgage, before the business trips and birthdays and long Sunday grocery lists. Back when she laughed without checking who was watching. Back when we shared secrets in bed at 2 a.m. and dreamed aloud like teenagers. That version of us had died a long time ago. I just hadn't buried it. She had. With a smile. And a toast. I thought I had seen the worst of it. That the wedding day ambush was the final cut. But the deeper I sank into the silence of my new life, the more I realized something still didn't add up. Elaine's decision wasn't just spontaneous, it was surgical, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something bigger. I wasn't looking for closure anymore. I had accepted the end. But questions lingered like ghosts. What had really pushed her to that stage? Why the coldness? Why the need to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved? These weren't the actions of someone simply walking away. These were the marks of someone trying to erase, rewrite, and dominate the narrative. And that's when the email came. It was anonymous. No name. No subject line. Just a forwarded message and a photo. At first, I thought it was spam. I almost deleted it out of habit. But something stopped me. The message was from Elaine's email address, sent 3 months before the wedding. It read, "I've decided I'm going to do it at the reception. He won't see it coming. I want it to be clean, public, final." Attached was a grainy photo. Elaine sitting at a hotel bar, leaning in toward a man I didn't recognize. They looked comfortable, familiar, too close. My throat tightened. I stared at the image, heart pounding. That one picture spoke louder than any letter. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated. A performance with me cast as the fool from the beginning. I couldn't think. I printed the photo and the email and tucked them into a folder I labeled Truth. I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to, but I needed to approach it on my terms. A week later, I found myself parked outside the upscale gym she frequented, the one I used to pay for but never dared step inside. She came out just before sunset, her hair damp, phone in hand, wearing that same careless calm she had the night of the wedding. I stepped out of my car and walked up to her. She froze when she saw me. "We need to talk," I said, holding out the printed email. She glanced at it and didn't even blink. Didn't try to deny it. "I told you we were done," she said. "That includes the explanations." But I wasn't there for permission. I pressed her. I asked who he was, why she did it that way. And finally, she let something slip, not out of guilt, but pride. "I felt like your shadow for 2 decades," she said. "At every event, in every room." I smiled. I played the part. But I was suffocating. I needed the world to see me step out of your light. Her words stunned me, not because they hurt, but because of how rehearsed they sounded. This wasn't a confession. This was a manifesto. I realized then that she hadn't just left me for someone else. She had left me for the version of herself she believed I'd been keeping caged. She didn't just want freedom. She wanted recognition. And she didn't care who she had to destroy to get it. I drove home numb, the road blurring under the weight of what I'd learned. It wasn't just infidelity, it was intentional character assassination. She wanted to be reborn, and I was the funeral she needed to walk away from with dry eyes and applause. I poured myself a drink when I got home, but I didn't touch it. I just stood there, staring at the life we once shared. Photos still lined the staircase. Her old scarf still hung by the door. Everything looked the same, but none of it meant anything anymore. I had spent years loving someone who had been quietly building an exit ramp behind my back. Emily came over the next night. I debated whether or not to tell her about the email and the man, but I knew she deserved the truth. I sat her down and showed her the folder. She didn't say a word for a full minute. Her face turned pale. "She planned this?" she asked softly. I nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, the light in her eyes dimming. "She used my wedding," she whispered, "my day, to make a statement." I saw her grip the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her from shattering completely. And in that moment, I hated Elaine, not for leaving me, but for stealing something sacred from our daughter. That was the worst betrayal of all. After Emily left, I gathered everything: emails, receipts, bank records, the photo, and put them in a fireproof box. Not for revenge. Not for court. Just for history. I needed to preserve the truth somewhere, even if no one else ever saw it. Because gaslighting can be subtle. Over time, people would forget the details. Rumors would twist the story. But I would have the record. The facts. The proof that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the coldness in her voice or the timeline unraveling behind my back. I had spent so long doubting myself, wondering what I did wrong. Now I finally knew. I didn't fail her. She just never planned to stay. And so, for the first time in months, I stood taller. I wasn't healed. Not yet. But I was no longer drowning in questions. I had answers, even if they stung. I knew who she really was. And knowing, even in pain, is better than living in the dark. That night, I lit a fire in the fireplace, not to burn the documents, but to warm the space around me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel cold. Rebuilding after devastation doesn't happen like they show in movies. There's no big inspirational speech, no music swelling as you find your feet again. It's quieter, slower, messier. It's waking up one morning and realizing the silence doesn't sting quite as much. It's opening the fridge without expecting someone else's favorite creamer. It's walking past your wedding photo without feeling the urge to rip it from the wall. Rebuilding, for me, began with small things. A new pillow. A new coffee mug. I stopped buying two of everything. The house still felt too big, but I began filling it with my own choices, my own rhythm, my own breath. For the first time in decades, I wasn't accommodating someone else's presence. I was rediscovering my own. I started seeing a therapist, a man named Joel with a calm voice and a gift for saying more in silence than most people do in paragraphs. I told him everything, from the toast to the email to the icy confrontation outside the gym. He didn't interrupt. He didn't label her. Instead, he asked me one question that echoed for days. When did you stop showing up for yourself? It hit me like a brick, because I had shown up for Emily, for Elaine, for clients, for everyone but me. I couldn't remember the last time I had taken a day off just because, or read a book that wasn't related to work, or asked myself what I wanted beyond being a good husband and father. I had lived a life of service, but never paused to make sure I was still in it. One weekend, I walked into a bookstore downtown. It was something I hadn't done since I was in my 20s. The scent of paper, the quiet hum of pages turning, it all felt strangely comforting. I picked up a copy of a novel I used to love, bought it without hesitation, and spent the afternoon reading on a park bench. No phone, no interruptions, just me and the wind. It felt good, foreign but good. Like meeting an old friend you didn't realize you missed. I started doing more of that. Cooking real meals, visiting museums, taking long drives without a destination. I didn't call it healing at the time, but looking back, it was the beginning of it. The beginning of choosing myself in ways I never had before. Elaine tried to contact me once. Just one text, 3 months after the divorce papers were finalized. It read, "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't answer. Not because I was bitter, but because there was nothing left to say. I had given her decades of conversations, and when I needed one, just one, she gave me a stage and an audience instead. Some things don't deserve a response. I deleted the text and went for a run, my feet pounding the pavement like punctuation marks to a sentence I was finally ready to end. That was the moment I knew I had turned a corner. When her name no longer triggered pain, just silence and peace. Emily noticed the change in me. One night over dinner at her place, she said, "You smile more now." I looked up, surprised. "You don't even realize it," she added. "But it's there." I didn't know what to say. She had carried her own wounds through this, the shattered image of a mother she thought she knew. And yet, she had shown me more grace than I deserved. She never blamed me, never asked why I didn't see it coming. Instead, she became my anchor, my reminder that not all love vanishes when people leave. Some of it lingers in the people who stay. And in her eyes, I saw not just forgiveness, but pride. She was proud of me for surviving, for rebuilding, for being whole again. 6 months after the wedding, I was invited to another, a colleague's daughter. I almost declined. The thought of sitting through another ceremony, another reception, made my stomach churn. But I went, dressed sharp, clean shave, new suit. I walked in, nodded politely, and took my seat in the second row. As the music began, I felt my chest tighten, but this time it wasn't pain. It was reflection. I watched the father walk his daughter down the aisle and realized how far I'd come. That man had no idea what storms might lie ahead, but he walked with pride anyway, and I respected him for it. After the ceremony, I stayed for a drink. One drink. Then I left before the toasts began. I didn't need to hear another speech. I had already lived mine. That night, I stood on my porch, the cool air brushing against my skin, and exhaled. The past was behind me, not erased, but no longer in control. I had scars, yes, but they weren't open wounds anymore. They were reminders. And in a strange way, I was grateful for them. Because sometimes, destruction is the only path to discovery. Elaine had shattered my world, but in the wreckage, I found a version of myself I didn't know I'd lost. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't even just a survivor. I was a man rebuilt, brick by honest brick. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like half of something. I felt whole. It's strange how life circles back in the quietest ways. Nearly a year had passed since Elaine raised her glass and shattered everything I thought was real. And yet, on the anniversary of that wedding, the one that changed everything, I found myself walking through the same park where we had taken Emily as a child. The benches were older now, the trees taller, but the path was still the same. I paused at a familiar spot near the duck pond, the one where I once taught Emily how to skip stones. That day, she had slipped and cried, and Elaine ran over, laughing, scooping her up like the world had ended. For a moment, I let the memory pass through me without grief. That was the first time I realized healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about remembering without falling apart. People ask me sometimes if I'd ever consider love again, and I tell them the truth. I'm not rushing it. Because now, I understand something I never did before. Love without truth is just decoration. It can look beautiful, it can sound like forever, but if it's not rooted in honesty and mutual respect, it will rot from the inside out. That's what happened with Elaine. We built a mansion on cracked foundation, and I spent years pretending not to notice the creaking floorboards. So no, I won't love quickly again, but I'm open to loving better. If it comes, it comes. And if it doesn't, I already know how to stand on my own. Emily came by one evening, holding a photo album she'd found while moving some things in storage. We sat together at the kitchen table, flipping through pages we hadn't touched in years. Birthdays, beach days, piano recitals. Some photos made us laugh. Others made us pause. When we got to the wedding photos, the ones before the toast, she touched my hand. I've been thinking about redoing that part, she said softly. Just for us. No big speeches. Just a dinner. You, me, and a video that actually honors our family. I smiled at her, eyes stinging with a warmth I hadn't felt in months. That's the thing about daughters. They see you even when the world doesn't. And sometimes, they help you rewrite chapters that someone else tried to burn. Eventually, I took down the last of the old wedding pictures from the wall. Not out of spite, but out of peace. It was time. I replaced them with travel photos. Me in Iceland beneath the northern lights, Emily and I on a rooftop in Florence, laughing with wine in hand. These weren't escape routes, they were proof. Proof that life didn't end when Elaine left. It shifted. It widened. It dared me to move beyond what I thought I needed. And in that movement, I found joy again. Real joy. The kind that doesn't depend on someone else's presence to exist. The kind that grows in you, quietly, until one day you wake up and realize you're no longer surviving. You're living. I got an invitation to Elaine's wedding 6 weeks after her engagement was announced. A cream envelope with gold trim. No note inside. Just a date and a location. She was marrying the man from the photo, the one she'd been emailing behind my back. I stared at the invitation for a moment, then calmly tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. Not out of bitterness, but because I had nothing to prove anymore. I didn't need closure. I didn't need revenge. I had won in the quietest, most dignified way possible. I had healed. And while she was still chasing attention, I was learning how to be invisible and powerful at the same time. That's a kind of freedom most people never reach. One night, while journaling, a habit Joel had recommended early on, I wrote something I hadn't said aloud. Thank you, Elaine. Not because I forgave her. That word still feels too soft for what she did. But because without her betrayal, I might have never discovered how deep my strength runs. I might have continued walking through life on autopilot, mistaking comfort for connection, loyalty for love. Her departure forced me to become my own rescue. And in that, I found a version of myself I actually respect. A man who no longer performs for approval. A man who tells the truth, even when it shakes the ground beneath him. A man who stood again. And so, this is how the story ends. Not with a final toast, not with a slammed door, but with a man walking into his own future, hands steady, heart open. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be here, stronger, wiser, alone but not lonely, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I am, not broken, not bitter, just free. And if you ever find yourself sitting in the ashes of something you thought would last forever, just remember this. Sometimes the worst moments are the ones that set you free. Sometimes, the toast that ruins everything is also the one that finally wakes you up. Thank you for listening to She Raised Her Glass, Then Shattered My World. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal or found strength in solitude, then know this. You're not alone, and your story isn't over. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply becoming the person they never imagined you could be without them. If you found meaning in this journey, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of survival, truth, and triumph to life. And if you have a story of your own, we're listening.